get started in a little bit. We're making sure our technology is appropriately
It's a goal.
staffed. All right, if the council can connect, we are ready for you. Check hold.
No, we're not quite ready.
All right, let's get this party started. It is Tuesday, April 25th, 2023. It is 6:35 p.m. and you are the Common Council of the City of Wausau. Welcome. Thank you, everyone. The first item on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. Next up, Clerk Caitlin will call the roll.
Okay. We have 10 voting members present.
All right, thank you. We had quite a few proclamations last meeting, so we don't have any today. First up.
Pardon me, ma'am.
The projector is still warming up. It looks like it's almost there.
So hopefully by the time we get through our presentation, oh, there we go. All right. So first up, our presentation from ECDC. It's an update on ECDC Multicultural Community Center in Wausau. Eric Yankee is with us. Thank you for joining us.
Great. Hi. Thank you all for giving me a few minutes of your time and your busy schedules. I'm Eric Yankee, and I work with ECDC, which is the Refugee Resettlement Office. We're based in Washington Square. I wanted to come tonight to be able to just give a little update on how things are going and to answer any questions that folks might have and questions you might be getting from your constituents. And again, hopefully help answer those as best I can. One thing that I want to point out up front that we found is a bit of confusion over the last 18 months since we've been working is that ECDC in our office is a branch office. We're a nonprofit organization, and we're really truly a local nonprofit organization. We're a branch that is connected to a national in terms of refugee resettlement, but everybody who works here is from here and works in refugee resettlement. And I have to admit, we're all pretty new at it in the last 18 months. In terms of our numbers, to give you a sense of our impact thus far, we have helped about 200 refugees settle into Wisconsin. About 150 are in central Wisconsin. We helped to settle refugees in Wausau and Stevens Point. We have a couple of families in Marshfield, and we're pretty much staying there for right now. We're looking at the larger communities because particularly the need for jobs and for transportation, those sorts of things, and housing. And so what we have developing, which I want to talk a little bit about, is in the next several months, we're going to continue to fulfill our numbers for our second fiscal year, which means every year we're looking to resettle roughly about 150 refugees in the area. And so our fiscal year runs with the federal fiscal year. So we start around October 1st and we run to the end of September. And now comes the busy season. Now is when we'll be getting more families. Usually during the first part of the year, it's a lot of kind of catching up and figuring out things from the last year and lots of reports to get done. And then as we hit the summer months and into the early fall is when we'll be settling and helping. We're estimating probably another 60 so people. We've already had a pretty good number already, but 60 plus will be resettling in the area. The folks that we've been working with, it might also be helpful just to know where they come from. We did begin by working specifically with Afghans. And so I think a lot of people associate us directly with the work with the Afghan communities. That is tapering off, so to speak, meaning that Afghan resettlement is still ongoing, but it's a complicated picture. Afghans who are still trying to flee the country may be trapped in Afghanistan and are trying to get out, and we have a number of our families that are trying to get family members out, but they also may be in sort of neighboring countries and trying to figure out a route, to either get to the United States or other places in order to live. So we may have more Afghans, and we have had individuals that have come to us from Afghanistan still. We do have a growing number of folks from the Democratic Republic of Congo and a few from Burundi. That is a result of the fact that in Central and Eastern Africa, there continues to be a great deal of instability. And therefore, if you look at the countries that surround those countries, so Zambia, or if you look at Burundi, Uganda, and that area, they have been, over the last couple of decades, hosting an awful lot of refugees from sort of Central Africa, and it's been a long time coming. So a number of the Congolese who've come to us have been living in camps for 15 years and plus, and so it's often very kind of heartbreaking, when you hear some of their stories. But they're lovely people. They're wonderful neighbors, and we've been getting to know them and enjoy them quite a bit, living here in Wausau as well as in Stevens Point and in Marshfield. We have been helping with Ukrainians. I think sometimes you might have questions about that. Ukrainian resettlement in the United States is ongoing. It's being done under a slightly complicated process that I don't want to have to get into, with for you guys. Just to let you know that since our office is established to help refugees, our support for refugees is not just the resettlement when they arrive, but it is ongoing for as many years as they are under certain categories or status, okay? So that means for most refugees, a couple of years, they could be coming to us for support. If they have special needs, there are certain programs, federal programs, that can go up to 5 years. So we are here to also help Ukrainians, though they are being settled typically by private sponsorship. So we help them. Usually we find out about the Ukrainians who need help in the area if it's a crisis. That's kind of how we get involved with them. Other folks that we're helping, we are helping with the Somali situation, but that's not typically something that happens here. As some of you might know, there is a pretty significant Somali population in the Twin Cities, and as a result of that, which has been there for quite some time, a number of Somali families have actually moved to Barron if you know where Barron is by Rice Lake in that area, it might be a little surprising, but the reason they're there is not for canoeing. The main reason is there's a Jenny-O factory there, and Jenny-O has recruited them from the cities, and so now there's a population of over 400 Somalis living in Barron, and so we're helping often when they are trying to help family members to come to the U.S., and some of their families have been separated for decades, and it's been really kind of a travesty to watch, but we've been trying to help wherever we can with cases to get them reconnected with their families. Upcoming, we are expecting our first families from Myanmar, so former Burma, the Rohingya Muslim minority group, which you may have heard about in the news over the last several years. We're going to be receiving some of those families in the next couple of months, as well as a few individuals from that area. There is a very significant Rohingya community in Milwaukee. It's actually pretty large, and our sense is that those offices are so busy that they needed a little more space and some more opportunities for families to, again, connect. And so we think that's why we'll be getting some Rohingya families coming here, because they may be trying to connect and reunite with families in Milwaukee. So that's our kind of our scope right now, and what we see coming in 150 in terms of this year, about 150, and then moving into the next fiscal year. So we have to look forward now to make our report to the State Department. That has to be done in the next few months, and they have us queued up again for probably another 150 for the next year as well, and kind of stay on that path for a little while. So just wanted to make sure that, everybody had a chance to kind of ask questions, and also just wanted to sort of end my comments by just thanking everybody, thanking the city for everything that you've done to really help be such a welcoming city for these new neighbors. Very thankful to the Chamber of Commerce for, hosting us for, our first 6 months, and now we're still in Washington Square. We kind of moved to the other end of the building, basically. Very thankful to the number of the employers in town who have been really gracious in helping us and employing folks. When these folks come, they are desperately looking for work, and so we really do appreciate the hard work that has gone from both sides to help them to be able to find employment and start their lives over here in central Wisconsin. So I'd like to open it for questions, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Maybe if you have a question, feel free to push your button. But I do have a question, and I feel like I might know the answer,
Okay.
but maybe for the public and all of us, if there was something that the city could do to support our refugee families, what do you think that would be?
Oh, boy. I can think of a lot of things. Public transportation is tricky. Transportation is tricky, and we all know that for folks who are economically challenged. And for the folks who are coming to us from other countries, we're working on getting their English language skills up. They're very anxious to get their driver's license. You have to have a certain level of English proficiency to pass those tests. Transportation is an area where we're always in need of help. We are particularly appreciative of the school district in terms of everything they're doing for the families, the children and their families. More help with the summer programming, for the kids is something that's a real biggie for us in terms of the families are very anxious to see their kids get a good education, and they are very anxious to see them, they want to see them integrating. That's quite often the case. In addition to transportation and the things that the city does in helping with education, I think another area is always just helping us in our relationship with employment. Employment, we understand why employers can be hesitant to hire somebody coming from another country. It's often the language barrier is sort of the first thing, but there's also cultural differences that are hard to understand. Anything we can do, I think, as a community to help both our new neighbors and the employers sort of have chances to interact more and see like where the fit is, and help them to kind of work towards that is tremendously appreciated.
Thank you. Alder Martins.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned working with other refugee agencies, both in Milwaukee and the Twin Cities. Mm-hmm. And I guess the question I had was when refugees come to the area, do they tend to settle here and stay in the area? Do they stay and then move on, resettle someplace else, or are they looking for opportunity? Because you mentioned like Barron, the Jenny-O plant is recruiting Somalis.
Yep.
I do remember that there was a large Somali population up there because of the because of the opportunities. So when refugees come to the area, do they tend to stay, or do they look for opportunity or to reconnect with family or something like that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So first, the refugees who come to us in central Wisconsin, the process they go through, typically is a multi-year process of sort of how they end up coming to the United States. And the ones who come to us have sort of ticked the box that they're willing to go anywhere in the United States, and they've never heard of Wisconsin. So it tends to be really terra incognita for them. Then they come to, central Wisconsin, like, where am I, sort of thing. So those who come are often looking for opportunities, and if they have families that are somewhere else in the country, they do try to reconnect with them. But that is a very expensive proposition, and what we're seeing with the vast majority, so of the about 200 or so that we've helped, about 150 are still living here, about 50 or 60 or so have moved elsewhere, and some others are looking to move based on other opportunities. Most of those who have moved initially, it was because of family. They had a family tie or a very close sort of connection somehow to a community. For instance, we had a couple of Syrian families, and they moved to Syrian communities. One in Chicago, the other one is in Indianapolis. But what we're hearing now often is we'll have heads of households who are looking at jobs and looking for job opportunities, and they'll connect very quickly, with folks within their language group that might be in Milwaukee or might be elsewhere. And for instance, we have a gentleman now who's looking very seriously at a foundry job in Neenah, and we'd like his family to stay here. But they're looking very hard to see what's their best opportunities to make a life for themselves. So that's a big part of it. One thing I will say too, that's part of the community here, is we pride ourselves in the fact the community has been so welcoming, that one of the reactions we get from the families genuinely is, even if they are looking for other opportunities, they are so fond of the people they've met here and the treatment they've received here. So sometimes there's a little stickiness to that too, that the community's been very welcoming.
Thank you. Alder Herbst.
Thank you, Mayor. What type of skills do the refugees have when they come to the United States? Are they well versed on certain things that they can do?
It depends on the group often. So, for instance, with the Afghans, what we had were a number of folks who were pretty highly educated, came from urban centers, often had a range of skills that could be anywhere from industrial through office work. A lot of folks who could plug in. Our folks coming to us from Congo who have been again in camp for 15 odd years. Typically agriculture, and so they do struggle more because they don't come with a lot of those kind of skills of a group like the Afghans, who were literally driven out of their cities, so rapidly. So we don't know with the Rohingya, but our hunch is with the Rohingya that it will be again kind of agriculture that they come out of. So we have folks that have a very great hard work ethic, but often the skill level with the Congolese has been a bit of a challenge.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Okay, thank you so much for the update.
Great.
We
Great.
welcome you back whenever you have things to share. Thank you.
Great, thank you all. Thanks for your time.
All right, next up, we have public comment. I just have one person who's registered, David Ekman.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Dave Ekman, Chamber of Commerce President, CEO, 209 West Washington. This evening, I'm here to express our organization's strong support for the S.E. Swiderski River Life Development, a new 200 multifamily market rate unit building to be situated on the Wisconsin River, adjacent to the Wausau on the Water and River Life. For well over a decade, the leadership of this city of Wausau, community stakeholders, and benevolent foundations have made long-term financial commitments to improve and revitalize a strategic part of our community, the riverfront. From Oak Island to the Whitewater Course and onward to the north, transformation abounds. Today, the Riverwalk extends up to Winton Street. In economic development, investment in infrastructure, the south to the north Riverwalk, is a necessity to attract commercial development investments. Your years of commitment have laid the groundwork for economic growth and prosperity. This evening, the S.E. Swiderski project a critical piece of the continued development, is in front of you for approval. As a resident of River Life and one who enjoys the walkability of the river and the community, I can emphatically state that the new project will add a vibrant new dimension to the River Life District, bringing more people to support commercial investments that result in increased tax base and population growth. Tonight, you have a local entrepreneur and proven developer that builds quality properties, bringing forth an opportunity to all of you and the citizens of this city. We urge you to support and act in partnership with S.E. Swiderski to bring this project to reality. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have our consent agenda. That is file number 230401 through file number 210414. I would entertain a motion. I have a motion by Alder Larson and a second by Alder Killian. Any discussion? I'm not seeing any.
You may begin voting. Motion passes 10-0.
All right, thank you. We are now on to file number 230403, Mayor's Appointments. We have Community Development Authority, David Wells. We have Historic Preservation Commission, Mary Ford, Kevin Crooks, Linda Trizak, Dave Oberbeck, Christine Martins, and Steve Miller. We have Plan Commission, Bruce Bolkin and George Borneman. Police and Fire Commission, Cheryl Barr. Sustainability, Energy, and Environmental Commission, Jesse Kearns. Transit Commission, Kyle Turner. And then Wausau Arts Commission, Sean Wright and Shannon Pushner. I would entertain a motion. I have a motion by Alder Lukens and a second by Alder Watson. Any discussion? Okay.
You may begin voting. Motion passes 10-0.
All right, thank you. Next up is file number 230406. It's a joint resolution from CISM and Plan Commission authorizing the sale of city-owned property at 123 West Thomas Street. I have a motion by Alder Henke and a second by Alder Herbst. Is there any discussion? Alder Killian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd been in communication today with a few members of staff and department heads. I had some questions, and if possible, I'd just like to ask a few follow-up questions. Thank you. Maybe Mr. Lindman. Evening, thank you. And you may have gotten the gist of some of my questions earlier. I was asking for clarification, and I think it would be good maybe for the body and the public, since it's kind of a convoluted scenario. In this particular situation, there's one parcel ID, but two addresses. Is that correct?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. And we had talked prior to the meeting, so they're tied together enough that if the property, say 1300 Cleveland Avenue, would have been sold, 6 months ago, it would have included both of those addresses. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't know how that works, Tom. I'm not, how properties connected or not. I just know these two properties have one parcel ID and two separate addresses because they're actually separated by another piece in the middle.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you. And
Yeah.
maybe I could ask Mr. Rubo that one in a second. But I guess maybe relevant to Public Works then, and the 1300 Cleveland is an open DNR ERP site right now.
That's correct, yeah.
But your understanding is it doesn't include this piece of land because it has a secondary address?
Correct, yeah. There was nothing in that area that would show that would be part of the area that's being investigated.
Okay, well, that's good
Yeah.
to know. And I'm sorry, one other, well, I can ask someone else. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
May I ask Mr. Rubo that
Sure.
question, Madam Chair?
Hi, Tom.
Hi there. Thanks, Rick. Just the question I asked Mr. Lindman about, had someone purchased these 1300 Cleveland 6 months ago, would it have included this secondary parcel or 123 West Thomas Street?
Well, I don't know, I wasn't privy to that information, but properties typically are not sold by property address or sold by a legal description. Even though you have a real estate PIN number, they're conveyed by legal description. So that the legal description could have been created for conveying just 1300 Cleveland.
Thank you. That's good to know, and it leads to my second question. If that's the case with buying and selling, do you know how it would work then with zoning or rezoning? Let's say hypothetically that 1300 Cleveland would have been rezoned 6 months or a year ago. Would that have included that whole parcel ID, the two addresses? Do you know that one?
What I've seen in the past historically, if it had a particular zoning, it stuck with that zoning, stuck with that property unless they went to a plan commission and had it asked for a rezone.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the info. And so I would just say it's kind of convoluted. I had some questions over the last few weeks. I got some answers today, but it appears that even though they're separate addresses, the parcel ID would have been dealt with in kind of a singular or monolithic way, not just for property sales, but for zoning and rezoning considerations. And because zoning and rezoning has been such a contentious issue with this particular property, 1300 Cleveland, I guess I think this could have more implications than perhaps SISM and some of us had understood. So that is a concern of mine. And secondly, we talked in the last committee meeting about environmental matters, and it's my understanding that groundwater impacts should be disclosed on properties. And I guess my question would be, says this sits on top of the Waleco groundwater plume. Has that been disclosed, and will it be disclosed to the buyer? Because I know that the city is dealing with properties on Thomas Street east of this location, and it's my understanding that all of those properties will also have to disclose contaminated groundwater impacts. So this would seem like a good time to start. Does anyone know the answer to that question?
I don't, but we can look into it if it's approved, the sale's approved this evening. Right now, their sign, St. Vincent de Paul's electronic sign, sits on this little sliver of land. But if you're requesting that we make them aware of that, I don't know why we can't do that.
Yes, and unless I'm mistaken, when we had dealt with a similar situation with Wausau Chemical, maybe 6 months or a year ago, a plume that had extended from there, we had interfaced with the DNR a bit, and it's my understanding, unless I'm mistaken, that those impacts should be disclosed.
I don't know if anybody else here was involved in those. I've not been involved in any of those discussions with the DNR, so I don't know that. But I can try to talk to staff about that.
Thank you, and I believe I have some emails from that exchange, and I can forward those along. But because of what appear to be some unknowns with the with some of the implications of this connected to 1300 Cleveland, I won't be supporting this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. This is actually being made 100 times more difficult than it needs to be. This is a tiny, we talked about this in SISM. This is a tiny little strip of land that St. Vincent de Paul's sign already exists on, and they would like to own the little strip of land that their sign is sitting on already. And so, we looked at that, we re-agendized it to make sure we had the right address description. And so 1300 Cleveland Avenue is not associated with this address, and no one is talking about selling or building anything on 1300 Cleveland. So all this is a little strip of land for a sign that's already there. And so there's just nothing happening here. This is like a giant nothing burger. So I hope we just support this and move on.
Thank you. Alder Killian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't see it as a nothing burger, but I'll eat that anyway, I suppose. So regardless of how small or large the property size may be, it still does not change our obligations, as I understand them, to disclose the groundwater contamination impacts. And one reason that's not making a mountain out of a molehill is because this will not be the last time we're dealing with this on Thomas Street, and I think doing it right in this situation would probably be the prelude to doing it right in the future. So the size of the parcel may be small, but the size of the issue is quite large and important. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Martins.
Okay, thank you. The question I have is how did the city end up owning this strip of land? And I don't know if Eric has the answer to that or not. Was this taken from St. Vincent de Paul when we redid Thomas Street as a permanent easement, and then we're selling it back to them, or what?
Yeah, no, we always owned a piece of property along the north side of St. Vincent de Paul, and then we own the piece, that is 1300 Cleveland. And so that, including St. Vincent de Paul, my understanding is that was all one piece of property that the city owned. St. Vincent de Paul was cut out with that legal description for where they are now.
Okay.
And then that piece that was in front or on the north side, when the new Thomas Street corridor was approved, it was left over right away. And we actually took some of the property and then had a little bit of extra left. And so we were left with a smaller strip than we had before, but, we were left with that strip. And so that area along the Thomas Street corridor was, I guess, the DNR did send us a letter that area was all approved. We did work through that area with the environmentals and everything that they required. So that area for St. Vincent de Paul, they did ask me for some of the information from the DNR, so I passed along the letter that the DNR provided to us for the construction of Thomas Street, and also along with some information when we did our soil borings and other things along that corridor. Yeah.
Okay. Was the sign was always there, though, but the previous owner of that building had a sign in that location, didn't they? And then St. Vincent de Paul upgraded the sign, or am I incorrect?
The Rose Garden.
The Rose Garden. Rose Garden had a sign, yeah, wasn't, or,
Can't remember.
or was their sign in a different location? It's hard for me to remember because I got to remember how the old street was. So, okay, well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Alder Denny.
Yeah, just to Alder Killian's point, what would disclosure look like for us? I mean, is the documentation that Eric passed along considered disclosure, or?
I would think it would be. I'm glad he shared that. I wasn't aware of that.
If there is no, if you're answering the question, I don't think we need to.
Madam Chair, and this will be my third occasion speaking. May I answer that briefly?
If there's no, if you're answering the question, I think that's.
Thank you. So, no, those would not have been relevant to disclosure on the DNR's website. On the Waleco Burt's page, it has the plume footprint, and I believe that would be getting closer to disclosure. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further commentary or any questions? Alder Gisselman.
So, just so that identifying it from the address, this is a separate parcel, right? This is identified as a separate parcel, nothing at all dealing with 1300 Cleveland Avenue or St. Vincent's. This has a separate, when we come to sell it, it will have a separate parcel number, completely separate from the other two lots on Cleveland Avenue.
Well, right now, and I don't know if Rick wants to address this, but it does have one PIN number. But yes, through legal description, we can sell this strip and separate the legal description. It's already excluded in the notes of the legal description on the land record site for that parcel, but I don't know if there's a map in the packet, but yes, there's 1300 Cleveland. Then you've got St. Vincent de Paul sitting north of that, and then this little strip of excess right-of-way along Thomas Street. So it's just a secondary address belonging to one parcel, one PIN number, but it's two totally separate physical parcels.
Just so
Yes,
that there's some degree of separation from the rest of the lots on Cleveland Avenue. That's my concern. So that
yeah,
it's
and I
clearly
guess I'm not
identified
sure I
as.
understand the question, but
So, do you mind if I maybe reframe it? It's not a sneaky way that the city is offloading 1300 Cleveland before we've cleaned it up and
No.
done what we said we were going to do.
no, we're not selling 1300 Cleveland
I'm
Avenue.
just
It's
being
not tied to
explicit.
that at all. Okay,
Get that, but I just want to make sure that what was said before was that we sell it by the parcel number rather than the address,
we sell it by the legal
by
description.
the legal description, and if that legal description is set, then that's
Yes,
what
it's
I'm-
completely
that's what I'm
separate and
asking.
will have no reference to 1300 Cleveland Avenue,
the-
to that address, to that
or whatever.
physical address or that parcel associated with that physical address. That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any further questions or comments? I'm not seeing any.
You may begin voting. Motion passes 8-2.
All right, thank you. Next up, we have item number 230407. It's an ordinance from CISM, amending section 10.20.080A, designating no parking on the north side of Sherman Street between South 3rd Avenue and South 8th Avenue. I would entertain a motion. I have a motion by Alder Henke and a second by Alder Gisselman. Any discussion?
Madam Chair, my phone's not working here, so,
Oh, boy. But we can call on you.
oh, there we go. I just wanted to say that this is nothing more than a house cleaning item. When we were looking at putting up the no parking sign on Sherman Street from 3rd to 4th Avenue, we discovered that there were signs already on the north side of the street from 3rd Avenue to 8th Avenue, but there is no ordinance to support them. So this is just a little housekeeping item to support that, to ordinance to support the signs. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? I'm not seeing any.
You may begin voting. Motion passes 10-0.
All right, thank you. We are now moving on to item number 940907. This is a joint resolution from Plan Commission, Economic Development and Finance Committee, approving the project plan amendment for number 5, Tax Incremental Financing District number 3, City of Wausau, TID 3. I have a motion by Alder Watson and a second by Alder Rasmussen. Is there any discussion? I'm not seeing any.
You may begin voting. Motion passes 8-2.
All right, thank you. We are moving on to file number 120316. This is another joint resolution from Plan Commission, Economic Development and Finance Committee, approving the project plan amendment for the Tax Incremental Financing District number 8, Amendment 3 in the City of Wausau. This is TID 8. Looks like I have a motion from Alder Watson and a second from Alder Lukens. Is there any discussion? I'm not seeing any.
You may begin voting. Motion passes 8-2.
All right, thank you. Next up is file number 170716, joint resolution from the Plan Commission, Economic Development and Finance Committees, approving the boundaries and project plan amendment 2 for Tax Incremental Financing District number 12, City of Wausau, TID 12. It looks like I have a motion by Alder Rasmussen and a second by Alder Watson. Is there any discussion? Not seeing any.
You may begin voting. Motion passes 7-3.
All right, thank you. Next up is file number 220105. It's a joint resolution from Economic Development and Finance Committees approving the development agreement with SC Swiderski LLC and SCS Wausau LLC for mixed-use development at approximately 1200 North River Drive, including lots 6, 7, and 8, and the sale of property. I have a motion by Alder Lukens and a second by Alder Herbst. I do have our folks from Swiderski here, and maybe we could do a quick spiel. I know that Randy, you told me who was going to speak, but maybe you're welcome to address us, and then we'll have our discussion.
Thank you. My name is Jackie McElroy, and I'm the director at SC Swiderski, and I'm here with Allison and Travis from our team at SC Swiderski. We appreciate just a few moments to go over a recap of our project for the River Life North parcel. So our project is called SCS Wausau, and what we will be doing is introducing a mixed-use building, and it's a newly designed 7-story Sterling building is what we call it, that has 200 market rate apartments inside. So there's going to be a wide range of floor plans and sizes inside the building, and that units were directly picked based on research we did for within the community, and also we have a lot of local knowledge of the Wausau rental market, being here for 30 years and renting properties across the city. So we're really excited about what we've selected here. On the main level of the Sterling building, there will also be 2 commercial spaces as well as parking. The building has a lot of great community features, so there is a rendering of our community room, so it has high-end finishes. Other spaces inside the building include a yoga studio, a fitness center, a conference room. We will also have patio space for cooking out and a rooftop terrace, so a lot of great amenities inside the building. Parking was somewhat of a challenge on this site, so we have 44 units that are inside the Sterling building, and they're kind of ground level, and that's due to the water table. It was hard for us to go with underground parking. We also have added this separate parking ramp that you see here. That is an additional 280 parking spaces for our tenants. On this page, you'll see we also have some surface spots. There are 21 surface parking spots that will be available for the public, so that will be open to anyone coming to this area that needs to park and kind of interact in the River Life area. And some of the key considerations, we know we have an incredible location here, and we really wanted to play up the river. So we have this open breezeway that we'll walk through, so people can get to our commercial space, but they can also access the river and the trail by walking right under the building. So we're really excited about adding this design feature and opening up that area. Also above that, throughout the building, you'll see there's a curtain wall system, so we have a lot of visibility with the windows, so we can take great advantage of the incredible views at this location. So overall, we have been working with the city since last summer when we started on this project, and we have a development agreement that we've worked through with staff and their consultant. So this project is a project of $52 million of investment by our company. We have agreed to a appraised value of $29.4 million, so that is what the incentive package is based on, and the full incentive would be after we have delivered the project on the site. So we look forward to answering any questions that you have here today, but if we do have approval of this development agreement, we can finish up through our due diligence period. We do plan to purchase the property for $400,000 at the end of the year. Construction would start in summer of next year, and we would open the building in early 2027. So I'm here for any more questions.
Thank you. I'll let Randy maybe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Very excited to be here tonight. As was mentioned, this has been a long process in getting us to this point. The city RFP, brought the RFP forward last May on this, and last summer, August or so, I believe that we actually chose the SC Swiderski proposal. As was mentioned, the project is located in one of our tax increment districts, number 12, with an estimated market value of the project at completion of over $29 million. The city engaged Ellers to assist us in reviewing the development agreement, looking at their application, determining the appropriate funds required to close the financial gap associated with this $52 million investment. The city in this case has proposed and worked with the developer on a pay-go or reverse TIF. in which they get a portion of the tax revenue they generate based on their development being completed. We find that to be the safest way for the project to move forward and ensure that we're going to be financially sound with our investment. Keith Dowell from Ellers has joined us virtually, and he's going to explain a little bit of the work that he did in going through their TIF application so that he can explain how we got to some of the numbers that we did. Take it away, Keith.
We can see you, but we gotta just, one moment.
Try again.
Can you try again? One more time. Oh my gosh.
No.
Again? Okay, one more time.
Can you hear me now?
Oh my gosh, we're so excited we can hear you. Okay,
Perfect.
we're ready.
So yes, we worked closely with city staff and the developer to complete a pro forma analysis, which ultimately entails reviewing the developer's budget, so looking at their sources and uses, making sure that they're maximizing their private sources, so financing through lenders, bringing equity to the table to close the financial gap. We took a look at the uses as well, so cost of construction, land acquisition, and all the other soft costs associated with the financing costs, professional services fees, and the developer cost as well. And we compared those against general industry standards. So ultimately, we're comparing this project against similar development projects within both Minnesota and Wisconsin. Generally speaking, everything seemed reasonable under current market conditions where interest rates are currently at and what we're seeing with construction pricing as well. Part of this analysis also looks at their pro forma and their cash flow over time. So we want to take a look at their rents, their revenues, and we looked at their operating expenses for insurance, administration, marketing, utilities, property taxes, and so forth, just to compare the operating expenses against other projects that we're seeing within the Wausau area. So through that, we're ultimately taking a look at their return on investment, because with the public dollars that we're providing to this project, we don't want the developer and the investors to be unduly enriched. So comparing their return on investment against other projects and what we're currently seeing for reasonable return on investments, the amount of public assistance that we're currently recommending, and that is in the development agreement, makes this project financially feasible for it to move forward. So with that, that's a brief high-level overview of the analysis that we went through. It was an iterative process back and forth with the developer and city staff. And it took several months, but we ultimately got to a place that we feel confident it is the best position for the city.
All right, thank you. I do have some folks here who've requested to speak. I don't know if you'll have questions, but thanks. Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. I'm excited to see this project come forward. I think that it's something that we were excited about when we saw the proposal, and knowing that as a result of our housing market study, we need housing at all price points. And so when we looked at this specifically in the Joint Review Board, we looked at it in our committees. One of the things that Keith talked about was that even with the developer incentives paid after they've generated the increment and put the building up, even then, there is still a percentage of increment that is retained by the city and that is coming into the TID for other city use from the beginning of the agreement. And I think that's important. They're not getting 100% of that increment. So right away, we will have some gains, and then over time, we will realize more gains. And then ultimately, at the end of the life of the district, I think we will be, in terms of value of those properties, light years ahead of where we would have been absent the creation of these projects. So hopefully we'll all support them, but I think that we would really set ourselves on a positive track to creating those housing units that we need at this price point, but then also opening up other opportunities in that missing middle. Freeing up other properties for other folks to access as well. So, thank you.
Thank you. Alder Larson.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. It's just last night, we had a neighborhood meeting, and I asked the question. I said, how many people in this room can afford $1,200 a month rent? Not one person raised their hand. For a little studio apartment, how many of my colleagues sitting here at this table can afford $1,200 a month rent? You know, we keep feeding this, these 1%, this 1%, this 1%. I wish we could see dollar for dollar going back into the affordable housing, you know, but for some reason, it just continues to get overlooked. I would like to ask Marianne a question, if I could. This TID that we're getting back, it goes back into the increment, can you tell us where that TID money is going to go? I mean, does it pay for salaries for police department or firemen, or does it, you know, because we
So by state law, we have to use it for TID expenses. So infrastructure, any expenses that the district has. Once the TID has terminated, then the entire value goes to pay, or can be applied to pay operating costs of the city, as well as operating costs of the technical college, the school district. So that really is the theory here, is that you help with development, knowing that once the development costs are paid for, you have growth within the community to fund things like police officer
Okay, thank you.
salaries.
And I believe Mr. Eller answered some of my questions about cash flow and stuff. You know, I guess I really would like to see some numbers before, and one other thing that we've talked about in this room, and I'm not going to mention the situation, but giving a hand up or a hand out. You know, we've got a multi-million-dollar corporation here, and I would like to say thank you for this, but you know, I understand the fact that, you know, building it and all this is going to cost some money, but, you know, also after a couple of years when this thing is up, you know, even if you're looking at 200 units at $1,200 a month, that's $240,000 a month cash flow. You know, and obviously there's going to be more than that, and obviously we don't know what the expenses are, what the mortgage is going to be, and so without those numbers being present, and I just, this does not benefit the city tax-wise today. Yes, we need help in our general funds. We just hired firefighters, we hired policemen. We need help today. We don't, you know, other than adding 200 units to this city here, it just doesn't do anything for the citizens of District 10. Since they can't afford to live there, and I don't think that adding another apartment building down on the River Life is creative. I believe it's going to take away the view from the city, and I will not be supporting it. Thank you.
So the cash flows of this project are in the TID 12 project plan amendment, along with Eller's financial analysis. So those you would be able to find in that TID 12 project plan.
All right, thank you. Alder Gisselman.
Yes, thank you. I will be voting against this. I think I voted against it originally. I feel that this really does dominate too much the riverfront. I think the 3 lots of green space that we're going to be selling really just take away too much of the riverfront. The people of the city of Wausau who are going to be, from this, they get a 10-foot path along the creek, as well as a 10-foot path along the riverfront. I think the people of the city of Wausau paid a lot of money for these lands, and I think they should be getting some benefit of it. We have a great playground to the north of it's constantly being used. I would think that we would be able to instill in some of the green space that we do have, some things for the adults and some things for the citizens of the city of Wausau. Mr. Larson made some points with regard to the housing, the need for middle and lower housing that we have. I feel that in addition to the points that Mr. Larson made, I think it just really, this project of seven floors, 7-story, just really overly dominates the riverfront. And I think that it really is not and a parking ramp. Is this the best use that we have for our riverfront, a very precious asset that the city has? I mean, we try hard to protect it and do the best we can, but yet we seem to be filling it up with apartments and condominiums that really do not that I don't think that are putting the best use of this riverfront for the citizens of the city of Wausau. So with that, I'll be voting against this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Killian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Alder Larson had raised some of the financing points and questions, and I find some of those interesting as well. And I think as the trend continues of using reverse TIF on projects in town, I think it's being promoted as a method with few challenges or implications, but that is not the case. I think they're a little different, and whether it's on the front end or the back, it still is a massive commitment of future city revenue. And also, Ms. Grote had commented about the benefit of closing TIDs, and then if I'm understanding, some of the money is freed up to the taxing entities, and it can circulate and be used for things that our people need and desire. Well, given the long terms of payment with the reverse TIF activities that the city has been using, like T-Wall, for example, the foundry, that's a payment term of 21 years. We talked about in the Joint Econ and Finance Committee that, and I believe it was confirmed by the city and Ehlers, that it was unlikely a TID could be closed while those contractual increment payments were still being paid to the developer. So I think the challenge and risk is twofold on the long payment term. On one hand, we're unable to close the TID during that period and reap the benefits, but it's also generating a large amount of interest. So on the T-Wall Foundry project, of the $10.8 million in public money over 21 years, I believe it was $4.8 million associated with interest alone. So I understand there needs to be at times new spending models and approaches, but reverse TIF, sometimes it's just as precarious to walk backwards off of a cliff than to walk over it face forward. So I think we need to be cautious of those things. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. One of the most dangerous things a person can do with TIF money is to give funding up front and hope that the project turns out the way you planned. As a city, we have moved away from that method years ago, and we've gone to the reverse TID arrangement because the risk is then taken on by the developer. They build it, they begin to pay taxes on it, and at that point, they receive a structured set of incentives out of the new tax increment or new tax dollars that they've created within the district. And so essentially, their incentives are funded out of the taxes that they are now paying on their new structure that they've delivered as per the contract. So that mitigates taxpayer risk. One of the best things we can do to grow our community is to increase tax base. And that is, we need construction and building at all levels. We need commercial, we need low income, we need moderate income, and we need high end. We can do all of those things in unison. We don't have to have tunnel vision. We've already invested over $1 million worth of incentives into low income housing. We can do this at the same time. And so we know from our housing study that we need housing in all price points. And even if it takes time, no one is going to convince me that there is no benefit to be derived by the city of Wausau from new tax dollars coming into the tune of tax payments on a $30 million structure. And so, you know, if we rewind about 5-6 years, the Wausau was in a development boom. We grew by $200 million in new value. We can have those things again. It needs to be a mixture of things. And so I think that we also need to recognize what their original plan for the riverfront was, and that it was to be a robust volume of public spaces. We wanted people to be able to access, use, and appreciate the riverfront. When we considered those proposals, that was the one thing we looked at. We got rid of one that stopped a boxy, square-looking building right in the middle of everything. We turned that project down. This project allows that pass-through. It allows access and enjoyment of the riverfront, brings new retail and office space down there, and it optimizes the parking. One thing we've always been concerned about there and in the rest of downtown is large surface parking lots. That's why there's shared parking in the one municipal lot we did build. The goal of the riverfront, when we talked about that vision and approved that plan, was to build up and not out. So we wanted things that were tall, that were stacked, so that we were optimizing within a footprint the capacity of those structures. That was something that we talked about way back to 2010 and 11 when we were first starting to plan and develop those spaces. And so this project, we've heard from our advisor at Ellers, it passes the but-for test. That's the analysis he's doing, is figuring out, but for a public-private partnership, could a project like this in this economy take flight? The answer was no. And so they engaged Ellers on purpose, and we've had this discussion also in the Joint Review Board, and we've had it in 2 committees. That's the test that these projects have to meet. And so can that public-private partnership succeed together? And in the end of that tax increment district, will we all benefit, including all 4 taxing entities? And that answer is yes. And so I think that we have to get behind projects like this, and whether it's new people coming to Wausau to pay property taxes, or whether it's companies that we already have here building great things and paying more property taxes, that's a win for Wausau. And I think that we can do all of these things at the same time, and we certainly don't need to silo ourselves into one particular type of housing or one particular price point, because I think when we do things like that, then we lose out on large-scale projects that we all could benefit from. So hopefully we'll all support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Denny.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I would disagree that the reverse TID is any safer for the city or less risky. Essentially, you know, the only thing it does is maybe disguise or changes the interest amount that we're paying. In a more traditional sense, we can be more clear how we're comparing what the city ask is, and now we've got to look at 5.5%, 6% over 21 years. It adds a significant amount to that. We're not pay it up front, pay it up on a reverse TID. I don't see a difference, but that's maybe an argument for a different day. I did support this from the get-go, because SC Swiderski, for one, is local. They've got a good track record. I did like their clear upfront ask. They asked for 15%. And I'm wondering if Ellers could speak to your justification for the increase. There seemed to be a little bit of an increase in that ask. And I don't know if those numbers were based on the original cost or the assessed value. Could you explain how that roughly, it's about 3%, we're at 18%, if I understand it right?
So just to answer that question, when they initially submitted their application requesting financial assistance, they were asking for about $7.25 million principal for an MRO note. Well, it's a municipal revenue obligation, but effectively it's a pay-as-you-go. If they build it, they'll get the tax increment benefit. So when you're looking at that total benefit, principal and interest, it was more than what we've ultimately negotiated down the public assistance amount to. We are currently at about 5 we're at $5.49 million for the principal amount of the MRO note, and there is an interest rate component to that as well.
If I may?
Absolutely.
So one of the things too, and we talked about earlier when I was talking, is that this went out last May. We brought the proposals to you in August. If you've been paying attention, there's been some fluctuation in prices since then. One of the things that when we started the negotiations, SV Swiderski came out with immediately was after they had rechecked their prices, their estimated cost of construction went up from $48 million to $52 million. So part of that is part of the reason that that cost or percentage went up. It went up from 15% in their original ask to 17.9 in what you have in front of you. Hope that answers that question.
Thank you. Alder Killian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of comments on some points by my colleagues on the reverse TIF approach. You know, I think initially, and especially during the T-Wall Foundry process, it was promoted on risk reduction. I don't doubt or disagree that there is decreased risk in that approach. You're paying on the back end. However, I think there are other reasons from my perspective why the city has changed funding schemes, and one of them is you know, just for two developments alone, this one and T-Wall, we're looking at $20 million in public funds over the payment terms. And I think the fact of the matter is the city is leveraged, and there's no way on the front end we're going to go borrow and take $20 million in debt. I think if we did that, I'd certainly hate to see the next Moody's analysis for the city, because there have already been concerns about debt, not just with the city, but with the associated water and utilities. So I think something that has not been underscored is that it's not just about risk reduction. There's probably no way at this point we could go on the front end and take that much debt. And the last thing is, as Alder Larson mentioned, we had a neighborhood meeting and this was discussed, and I think that one thing when we talk about city participation, that sometimes I think the public looks at things a little different. We apparently the 18% is for the 51 million it would take for this to be put together, constructed, or developed. But in the contract, the minimum guaranteed assessment contractually is only 29 million. So when you look at 29 million versus the 51 million based on the guaranteed minimum assessment, that's actually 31% in that context. And I know the ED team does not approach it that way, and apparently others do not, but I think moving forward it might be a good metric or indicator to put in the information just what percentage of city involvement in relation to the contractually guaranteed minimum assessment, because in this case it was 31%, and in the T-Wall case it would have been 45%. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? I'm not seeing any.
You may begin voting. Motion passes 7-3.
All right, thank you. Next up, I'm asking you to suspend the rules, 6B for filing, and this does require a 2/3 vote. I have a motion by Alder Watson and a second by Alder Lukens.
You may begin voting. Motion passes 10-0.
All right, thank you. We are on to file number 030306. It's a resolution from the Finance Committee authorizing the write-off of certain uncollectible delinquent personal property tax accounts from the city's accounting records. It looks like I have a motion by Alder Watson and a second by Alder Lukens. This did pass the Finance Committee tonight unanimously. Any comments or questions? I'm not seeing any.
You may begin voting. Motion passes 9-1.
All right, thank you. Now we're on to file 121118. It's another resolution from the Finance Committee approving production agreement between the Wausau School District Board of Education and the administration and the City of Wausau. This also passed Finance tonight unanimously. I have a motion by Alder Watson and a second by Alder Lukens. Any?
Did you mean to amend?
We'll ignore it. It's fine. Any comments or questions? I'm not seeing any.
You may begin voting. Motion passes 10-0.
All right, thank you. We're now on to file number 221109. It's another resolution from the Finance Committee approving the 2023 budget modification, 48th Avenue Intercept project. This also passed Finance unanimously. I have a motion by Alder Watson and a second by Alder Herbst. I'm not seeing any discussion.
You may begin voting. Motion passes 10-0.
All right, thank you. File number 221109A, it's a resolution from the Finance Committee approving a 2023 budget modification for Riverside Park remediation. This passed Finance Committee unanimously. I have a motion by Alder Herbst and a second by Alder Rasmussen. Any discussion? Alder Killian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this is a really positive step forward, and I just had one question, maybe for Mr. Lindman. Is the anticipation that the remediation will likely occur this summer then? Thank you.
Yeah, that's our anticipation. We're waiting on one response on endangered species back from the DNR yet. We thought maybe it would be back last week, but we're still waiting on that.
Okay, thank you.
Any further comments? I'm not seeing any.
You may begin voting. Motion passes 10-0.
All right, thank you. We're on to file number 230408. It's a resolution from the Finance Committee approving the closure of the McClellan parking ramp. This passed Finance Committee unanimously. I have a motion by Alder Rasmussen and a second by Alder Lukens. Alder Denny.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It was hinted at during the Finance Committee, but I'm just wondering what the Dudley Tower management reaction is to this. Have we discussed this move with them?
I don't know who wants to maybe, we've had lots of conversations.
The legal office has not discussed it with them.
I have not. The contacts I have had have been with, some of the businesses and the buildings for BMO and then through Compass Properties. But we have drafted a formal notice and things like that, depending on what the decision is this evening, so.
Okay, so we haven't anticipated what their reaction might be. I mean, I have no idea if they'll be pleased or unpleased.
We've had many conversations in the past, just since I've been, not many, but a few, with about the skywalk and about the life of the ramp and the expectation. And for the last, 5 to 7 years, we've been trying to keep this ramp available to the best of our ability. And I think all of the businesses and everybody, has been well aware that this is reaching the end of its life. And so I think the notices will go out depending on what the decision is this evening, and then we'll have discussions about, because we have plenty of parking available for everybody that's down there. So,
Did you have follow-up?
Yeah, I guess I do. Thank you. It just, I guess, just from a nice neighbor, when we have other things that affect neighbors, backyard chickens or whatever, we put notices out that we're looking at this so we can have a public hearing, get the input from neighbors. I don't know if that's an appropriate use of the public input notice or not, but I guess it strikes me odd that the person who's affected the most by it is the Dudley Tower, and we haven't talked to them. So
I don't know that it's true that we haven't talked to them.
Specific to this motion.
I mean, I know I've personally had conversations about that ramp since I walked in the door here. So, but, I mean, it's unfortunate that we don't have our ED folks here right now, because I know they've taken the brunt of those conversations, but.
I'm not throwing up stones there. It would be good to know that they were either on board or not on board. But
They don't love it. I mean, really, they want that ramp to be rebuilt. So I think that's the message that I got. Thank you. Alder Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is kind of surprising that this all of a sudden just came up just out of the blue. I mean, for a lot of us here, and I'm also surprised that, you know, as chairman of the SISM committee, this didn't come through us first. You know, because we are, you know, capital improvements for the city, and I'm assuming that, you know, the purpose of the committee is to make sure all the i's are dotted and the t's are crossed before it comes to the council. And that is the purpose of the SISM committee or any committee in any instance. You know, I just think that we are overstepping ourselves here, and I think I'm going to make a motion that we table this and send this back to the SISM committee so we can investigate it and bring it to the council.
Okay, so what is it? You have to, if you want to amend, you have to push your button.
And are you moving to really table it or to refer it back to SISM?
Well, whichever
Refer
way you
to
want to do it,
SISM.
I refer it back to SISM because I feel this is where it belongs first and foremost.
Okay, we have a motion to refer to SISM. And it looks like I have a second from Alder Killian. Sorry, you were all just wiped. Do you have something you'd like to say first?
I think I just want the council to recognize too that this has come up because of the recent analysis that we had done by Walker Parking, the engineers, right? So this came to finance tonight, and it is coming quickly because of some significant work that has to be done to keep this ramp viable and safe. And so a decision needs to be made whether you're going to spend a lot of money based on that report, or for just gathering a few more months, or if we are going to move ahead with shutting this ramp down for the reasons noted in the report and the evaluation that we received. I believe it was in March. And so, you know, so like if we're, I just want you to know that, you know, that ramp is deteriorating actually more quickly than we had actually thought. And so that is why this is here right now. I mean, we're talking about to keep this viable just through this year is going to be some extensive shoring, timbers, and some other work that will need to be done. And that's, and likely we will be closing the top floor too as well, just because of deterioration and potential areas that at some point somebody's tire is going to go through that top floor deck.
And-
So.
And I may understand that, but at the same time, you know, we have a certain protocol we go through to get things done here. And when you start pushing things beyond, you know, you set the protocol aside and just start doing things on your own, that raises black flag or red flags, and I don't want to see that in this city. Thank you.
Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. This was at Finance tonight because it involved money. And the choice that we were faced with was to put in a substantial amount of money right now to buy ourselves a short period of time or not. And the Finance Committee opted that was a bad investment. But we're gambling with people's safety here. The ramp is past its useful life. It probably should have been taken out of service a few years ago. I don't know if anyone has parked in it lately, but go park in it. And then sit in your car while people are driving through and feel that thing bounce. I parked in that ramp for 8 years when I worked in the City Square office tower, and it was bad then. And so if they're saying that the top deck isn't safe anymore, we can't afford to gamble with stacking cars on top of cars on top of cars. People are walking in this facility to get to their vehicles. They determined that they can harvest out the LED light fixtures that we had in there and repurpose them elsewhere. But at some point, we can't afford to run this thing to collapse. We've had issues when parking ramps before with falling concrete. We've had issues with trip hazards. And imagine what, and we also can't do our business worried about the fact that the folks across the street might be unhappy. That's ridiculous. I mean, they asked us to construct a skywalk and a stair tower to a building that had less than 10 years of useful life left. And, you know, they were going to put the screws to us and put the pressure on us to do that 5-6 years ago. And so I think that we need to take action on this, and I think there's nothing to be gained by a refer back to SISM. All you're going to ask SISM is the same question you asked Finance. Do you have $350,000 to buy one more year or not? And when that committee votes no, you're right back here again. So I can understand that we sometimes want multi-committee action to follow a set process, but I also think that if there's a viable safety concern with the top decks of that ramp already, and they've got a report saying so, now you're treading into liability territory if something happens in there. We knew it, we failed to take action, we failed to prevent an accident or an event. So I think if we're being told by the parking experts that analyze this thing for safety that it needs to be out of service, then it needs to be out of service. I don't think adding one more layer of red tape in this particular case is going to help us. That ramp is scary. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Denny.
I was convinced by what they did present that this is an issue. It's a problem. I didn't drive in it myself. But to Alder Larson's point, we have processes in the city, and if it doesn't delay the potential shutdown, I think we should be doing it the right way, if that's the right way. And I would support sending it back. I don't know if that delays your June 1 target or not.
Thank you. Alder Gisselman.
Yes, thank you. So I too have questions, but the larger issues with regard to the ramp are, do we have 500 other parking spots in downtown Wausau that we do? Because I'm sure that the McClellan ramp was part of that 500 at one time. Also the Jefferson Street ramp, as well as the lot behind the library. So there were a lot of pieces to the puzzle of the 500 parking spaces that we had to provide for the Dudley Tower. I don't know that, because I know we were begging for a lot of spaces when we put that 500, and the McClellan Street ramp was part of that. Coming down First Street, I see a lot of the Dudley people moving into, if the Jefferson Street ramp is empty, that's fine, but we have Whiffley and Reuter and the rest of the Dudley Tower people, as part of that that's the reason I want a SISM. I just need to be assured of those lots. But I think there's a larger issue of the infrastructure. I think that what is the plan? So we close the ramp. So then what? So then what's I think that kind of issue should be coming to SISM. With regard to the larger issues, the parking. That's why I urge the chair to perhaps call a special meeting of SISM, so that if we are on a short mission here with regard to the ramp, Public Works has to do what they have to do with regard to the safety of that ramp, granted. But I think that if there's an opportunity here for the larger, as part of this, I think we just have to come to a conclusion about how we're going to see the rest of parking, the rest of that block and the block to the north, as with regard to the future of how we do parking in downtown Wausau. And I would like to also hear from the Dudley Tower, their legal team, with regard to that. I don't want any surprises that having them show up at a city council meeting and say, hey, wait a minute. That's why I was supporting Mr. Larson in having perhaps a special CISM meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. What's the? Jessica?
If I may, there are 795 stalls, approximately 795 stalls in the Jefferson ramp. We're at about 32% occupancy right now, so that in itself provides 500 stalls. And then we actually own the lots, or we're maintaining the lots to the north of the Dudley Tower. I think there's about just shy, maybe or a little bit over 100 stalls in that lot too. And then obviously there are Lot 20, which is the lot that is immediately south of the McClellan ramp, has I think about 60 stalls in it. And then Lot 14, which is north of the McClellan, also has spaces. That is just a gravel lot right now, so I'm not actually sure how many spaces. I think it says there's 50 in there, but so we definitely have sufficient capacity. I think the other thing, when we look, for example, the Pennies ramp, we're at, I think, about 11% occupancy. That's a 531 stall ramp, and we have seen some movement out of the Jefferson ramp into that ramp just because for large vehicles, it's much easier to park in the Jefferson ramp. So we have seen some movement into that ramp. So, I think that COVID, certainly impacted the census of downtown businesses and the number of workers working downtown, and that has contributed significantly to our vacancies, as well as the mall closing obviously had a big impact on parking in the downtown. And, when we construct the ramps, they immediately start to depreciate and decline. I mean, that's concrete for you. But so we really need to be careful and not, create at a large expense, because a parking ramp is about $25,000 a stall. I would guess those are numbers that we were given a long time ago. So it's a very expensive endeavor to build a ramp and to maintain them. And so, we definitely don't want to prematurely construct a new ramp unless demand, really justifies it.
Thank you. Alder Lukens.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Grote, for that information. And those of us on finance were informed of that at the meeting, that there were like only 30% of the stalls used in other ramps. I do understand. I'm Blake Alder Larson's request and concerns about protocol. And I think, so I understand that, and I'm not on CISM, but having a family member who's worked with masonry for years and years and years, also having worked in the legal field with injuries and personal injuries, safety should be a concern. So sometimes, I think that I'm definitely in favor of this coming down. It's, I forgot how old you said this was, Mr. Lindman?
76.
Okay.
So it's approaching 50 years.
So I do think that, I guess that's why I would be in favor of this, not to try to, forego any other protocol. But, so I'm just going to say something else, that I think what I would appreciate, I guess, at some point is also, our maybe it would be helpful too if we did have significant questions about some of this, to reach out to some of the staff ahead of time, because, I know that our purpose is checks and balances, right? But at some point, I guess I would like to think that, the staff of the city and the other people that they rely on to do the safety checks and things like that. At some point, we have to trust, and rather than question maybe every single thing. I'm struggling with that tonight because sometimes it's feeling to me like we're questioning every single thing, and if we're not the experts on some of the safety measures, and so I guess I would really appreciate if we could try to trust that or ask some questions ahead of time if we have significant questions on some of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Watson.
I guess I'm concerned because the whereas on the second page of the resolution wants the 2 top floors closed immediately. If this does get reverted back, is there a way that we can just close the top 2 floors? And then if they want to rehash out, some of the other issues?
I guess that would be up, to the council. I would certainly recommend that for sure. What we're trying to do is trying to inform everybody, right? Try to make sure that everybody's aware of what's happening. Get formal notices out to everybody that is affected by this. Continue communication with them. Allow them and inform them that there are other parking locations. But when it does come to safety and we start hearing from our engineers that, that there are safety concerns, this is, a broader picture than somebody's parking spot. It's safety in the public. And I think that this is urgent right now. And so I would take direction from this body on what they would do, but I would highly recommend shutting down those top 2 floors immediately. Staff is continuing to work with the businesses and communicating with them to find alternative parking and making it as less disruptive as possible. So.
And I guess I'm worried about delaying it if we don't pass it today, that those 2 floors will remain open unless we can just advise staff to close them without the resolution. I don't know if that's possible.
I think it might take an amendment if the person making the motion to refer back to committee would be willing to perhaps amend their motion to refer it back to committee, but allow the top 2 floors to be closed immediately. And you get a second to that, unless you're moving
So
to
the motion
amend
and the second to the amendment right now is from Alder Larson and Alder Killian, so it would be on them if that is something they're amenable to.
Can I speak, Madam Chair?
Is it related to or amending the?
Yes,
Okay.
it is related to the amendment.
Well, so we have a queue of people that are ready to speak. So if you're amenable to amending your amendment, that's what we could talk about right now.
No, I'm
Otherwise,
not.
Okay. All right. So we're not amenable to that. So we'll continue the
Because,
conversation.
can I give it a reason or not?
I mean, you can.
Okay, never mind. I'll wait till my
Okay.
turn.
Yeah. You're the third in line of 4 people. So Alder Dinney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess if we're the operators of the ramps, and we take safety in consideration. I don't think it's necessary as the operator to seek approval from the council to make a safety call on closing 2 floors. So I mean that could happen tomorrow, pending further review on what Alder Gisselman talked about is the larger plan, and let's get an understanding of that. But when it comes to safety, if we're the operators and are responsible for it, let's do the right thing, and I don't think you need permission from the council to make a safety call. That to me should go without saying.
Thank you. Alder Rasmussen.
Thank you. I don't want this to turn into a power struggle between committees, and I feel like that's what this is becoming. And so where we're at is someone needs to show me what is to be gained by having a CISM meeting now, because the only choices you have and the only choices we were presented in finance was spend money or close it. So we can sit in CISM and we can talk about how the neighbors feel and what the dangers are and what the engineering study says, and we're going to come right back around to the same thing. You're going to have one of 2 outcomes. Close it, which is where we are right now. We could save some time. Or spend all this money to give it another year of life, which The SISM committee can't spend any money, so that puts you right back in finance where we just came from. And the finance committee vetted this tonight and decided it wasn't interested in spending money to buy a year of time. So you're creating this circle logic, and you gain zero. If there was a chance of a different outcome, I would support a refer back, but there isn't. Like, you're either going to spend money or not, and the finance committee has already said they're not interested in spending money, and here we are. So you gain zero by adding this extra, like, cog in the wheel. Thank you.
Thank you. And maybe to add a little bit of clarity, I have been having conversations about this with our team and, seeing some headlines both in our state and in our nation about parking ramps. My one thought was, I don't want to be a headline like that. We cannot be that headline. Can you promise me we won't be that headline? And, when the answer is, I don't like that. So, that is partially why it is on this suspension of the rules portion. I have to say, we'll talk about it here at council, but that's why we're here. So we will continue the queue. Alder Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If it's safety, I'm all for safety, and I don't want to see a parking ramp fall down and kill people or ruin people's lives either. But the fact of the matter of it is we still have a protocol to go by, and that is go through SISM first and then bring it to the council, bring our findings through the council. If we don't, it's not in the public's best interest. And as far as safety goes, then close it off. As Alder Denny mentioned, if safety's a problem or matter or issue here, close the thing off until we figure out what to do with it and go through the proper channels to do that. Thank you.
Alder Gisselman.
Yes, thank you. I, too, agree with Alderperson Deeney that I think the staff, when it sees a safety issue with regard to snow or whatever, I trust them to do the right thing. And if they have to close the two top floors, so be it. If you want something coming official from this body this evening, I can certainly make that amendment to Mr. Larson's motion with regard to his amendment with regard to the resolution. But I think that you have the confidence of the city council to move ahead to take care of the safety issues as you see it. I don't see it as a power issue between committees. I think that SISM, the larger issue of the ramp, the presence of the ramp, with regard to everything that's happening on that block and in the neighborhood, is a SISM issue. And I think that should be coming, I think that should come to SISM. That is what that committee does. And I feel that is where it belongs. How it gets there and the final result of that, I don't know. But I think that the overall view of that ramp and how that ramp plays in the parking of downtown is a matter of SISM. And that's why I think we needed to look at that, and hopefully soon. But I don't mean to be in argument with the Finance Committee. I think it's just a matter of having us look at our job as part of SISM to take a look at it and make recommendations or statements or whatever. That's why I'm supporting the sending back to SISM. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Killian.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I would agree with those sentiments that it is not about a power struggle, that it's about a process. And I think if we follow the logic that if something's going to happen anyway, then we can just abandon process, then really on any massive subsidy to a high-end development, we could just stop sending it to finance and send it right to council, because those votes are almost invariably the same. And with the Joint Review Board, it's never rejected anything that's come before it. So the only purpose to send it in front of the Joint Review Board for TIF changes is really a legality. I can't think of one instance ever in the history of the city that it's ever rejected something. But the point is that it is process, and so I think that process should be followed. On the questioning matter, I'd say that I have great respect for the city's staff, workers, and departments, and the vast majority of them are responsible for keeping this city running or running at all. That being said, the decades of City Hall history is, and that unfortunate history here with City Hall over decades, it has not been about the vast majority of staff or workers. It's often been a select few over our local history. And so I think it is wise to question things given our local history, and sometimes after you question them some more. And finally, on the immediate hazard front, I agree with those sentiments. I think staff should have the ability to act when they feel there's an immediate safety hazard. I think maybe they do have that ability in our municipal code that gives the power to act on immediate hazards with city-owned property. But if they don't, I'd certainly support making sure that they have it. On the amendment from Alder Larson, I will follow his lead on that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I don't see any more requests to speak, so right now you are voting on an amendment to this resolution, and that amendment is to refer it back to SISM.
You may begin voting. Motion passes 6-4.
All right. So with that passing, do we take another vote, or do we assume that we're done now? Okay. 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 All right. We are moving on to file number 221109B. It is a resolution from the Finance Committee approving the 2023 budget modifications for professional services. It looks like we have a motion by Alder Watson and a second by Alder Rasmussen. Any comments on this one? I don't see any.
You may begin voting. Motion passes 10-0.
All right, thank you. Last up here, we have public comment and suggestions. If there is anybody here who would like to avail themselves of this opportunity, you're welcome. Okay, I don't see anybody. I would take a motion to adjourn. I have a motion by Alder Watson and a second by Alder Henke. All in favor can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. See you next time.